Yo, today is January 18th, 2025. My name is Derek. Welcome back. In this video, we're going to cover the death of David Lynch, a filmmaker perhaps best known for the series Twin Peaks, which wasn't only a television series back in the early 90s, but was also made into a film, with the series being extended for a third season back in 2017. Now, what I want to focus on throughout this video is that the death of David Lynch made news on the morning of the 16th. So this would have been Thursday morning. David Lynch passing away the night of the 15th, with news breaking the following day. So this video is essentially a part 2 of my last video, which was on the death of Brewers broadcaster Bob Uecker. Because Bob Uecker died the next day, January 16th, and news of his passing was published right around the exact same time as David Lynch's. So what I want to focus on is this connection between these two men. Because in the TV show Twin Peaks, as well as the movie, there happens to be a character named Bob, who shares this first name with Bob Uecker. And Bob is kind of a murderous spirit, seemingly one of the arch villains of the show. And it seems like a coincidence. Now, someone else did point this out to me. I believe it was on Discord, and I apologize because I can't find the message. But in my reading upon David Lynch, I came across this character and knew there must be a connection with these two. So we'll focus on the numerology that syncs broadcaster Bob Uecker to the series Twin Peaks. Now, think again about the date January 16th, when all of this was in the news. The date 116 is, of course, like the number 116. And when you flip the number 116 upside down, it becomes a 9/11. And this is relevant to a series called Twin Peaks. Obviously, the Twin Towers were destroyed on 9/11 or September 11th. And the fact that this is an upside-down 9/11, this is attributed in films like Back to the Future, for instance, where Marty visits a Twin Pines mall where they encounter terrorists. And he gets there at 1:16 a.m., the upside-down 9/11. Of course, this later becomes Lone Pine Mall, much like how the Twin Towers became one World Trade Center, merging into one building. Now, in my video on Bob Uecker, I explained how his death was connected to a baseball player named Mario Mendoza. As in baseball, there's something called the Mendoza line, which talks about a 200 batting average. And Bob Uecker's career batting average was exactly 200. Now, in my last video, I mentioned that the day that Bob Uecker died, Pope Francis suffered a fall. And notice how Pope Francis's real middle name is Mario. So there's a deeper connection here with Pope Francis, Bob Uecker, and David Lynch that we must unravel. Another thing about this guy, Bob, is that throughout the series, it appears as if he, and I say it appears, I didn't see the whole series, so I don't know everything about this, but there's another character named Mike. And it's like Mike is, actually ends up working with Bob to commit murder. Now, Mike is very close to MKE. And MKE Airport is the one in Milwaukee, which is where Bob Uecker was born and spent his entire career either playing baseball or commentating the game. So let's start out with the number in the headline for David Lynch, 78, which was his age at passing. David Lynch is one of the rare celebrities born in the state of Montana. And using the standard alphabetic order, where each letter is numbered 1 through 26 relative to its position in the alphabet. The state of Montana equals 78. 78 is also a number connected to Bob Uecker, whose name equals 78 in the Latin ordinal cipher. Also, Wisconsin equals 708 in reverse Sumerian. This 708 is shared by the show Twin Peaks, which also equals 708 standard Sumerian. The Sumerian method identical to ordinal, but multiplies the alphabetic order by 6, the first perfect number. And in the series Twin Peaks, the character Bob is played by an actor named Frank A. Silva. And check out how Frank A. Silva equals 708. The main character of the show is played by Kyle Merritt McLaughlin, whose name equals 708. And then there's also a character in the show named Laura Palmer, whose name equals 708. And this provides an interesting link, which I'll cover in a minute here. The reason I think Laura Palmer is an interesting name for this show, Twin Peaks. Let me see if I can find this here. So the whole show is centered around the murder of a woman named Laura Palmer, right? And it's made by David Lynch. Well, back in 2023, in December, I made a video on the death of Laura Lynch, who's a member of the Dixie Chicks. So Laura Lynch, we get David Lynch making a series about a woman named Laura. There's actually a pretty deep connection here, because January 16th was a span of 392 days after the death of Laura Lynch of the Dixie Chicks. The 392nd prime number is 2693. Now, when Twin Peaks returned for its third season in the year 2017, right here are the dates, May 21st through September 3rd. The show premiered 2,693 days before Bob Uecker's final game in the broadcast booth in Milwaukee. When the show ended a few months later, it was 2,693 days before the death of Bob Uecker. So what this means is that the show lasted 15 weeks, season 3 of Twin Peaks, exactly 15 weeks. And Bob Uecker died exactly 15 weeks after his last game on the radio. In reverse Sumerian, David Lynch's full name equals 1500. And we're going to look at how this all connects to the moon and the number 666, just like we did in my video on Uecker. The 15th prime number is 47, a number of the circle. Of course, the Freemasonic compass set to 47 degrees. Well, Bob Uecker would have been 47 days after his birthday for the total eclipse that occurs on Pi Day, the first total lunar eclipse in almost 3 years. When Uecker died, he was a span of exactly 4,747 weeks old. And his death was also 47 weeks after Kyle MacLachlan's birthday. Kyle MacLachlan is the man who plays the main character, Dale Cooper, on Twin Peaks. And it's curious that his name is Cooper in the show, because Cooper equals 90, and that's how old Bob Uecker was when he died. He was the announcer of the Brewers, which equals 90. Voice of the Brewers, a double 90 in our reduction ciphers. These methods also called Pythagorean, reducing every double-digit number to a single digit. And yeah, shout out to the chat, too, for pointing out that there was also a movie released in 1992 called Fire Walk with Me. And we're going to look at the gematria of this name in a minute. But it's worth noting, in light of all of the fires that have been raging throughout Southern California recently. So this eclipse coming up is on Pi Day, 314 of the year 25. Eclipse equals 314, pi equals 25. Twin Peaks Season 3 lasted a span of 3 months and 14 days. This is the same duration from Bob Uecker's last game to his passing, 3 months and 14 days. And of course, this is all right after the Catholic Church opened the 5 doors. Catholic and doors, both 314. So we'll get back to the eclipse code in a second, but first I want to look at this amazing connection between the Pope, David Lynch, and Bob Uecker. Because when David Lynch passed away, he was exactly 1,056 sidereal months old. And this is, of course, an important eclipse number. Eclipses only occurring 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases after the last. On January 16th, Pope Francis was in his final day of being 1,056 months old. And Francis was born 1,056 days after Bob Uecker. So what are the odds that David Lynch and Bob Uecker are in the news on the exact same day? The eclipse code is also connected to the crucifixion of Jesus because in 3 of the 4 Gospels, darkness falls over the sky, much like an eclipse during the daytime. While on the cross, Jesus yells for God, which translates to Eli. Eli is the number 173 flipped upside down. Well, when you look at the Pope's age on January 16th, he was 32,173 days old. And this connects to the moon as well, because the Pope was born during Brown lunation number 173. In fact, the phrase Brown lunation equals 173 reverse. Remember, the Brown lunation system began in 1923. And it's named after an astronomer named Ernest Brown. So what about the number 37? I want to talk about this. David Keith Lynch, his full name, has Gematria of 307 in capital letters. When you mix caps in with the small letters, you get 307, his full name. Well, the name Bob is 37 in the same method. In reduction, Bob Uecker has matching 37 Gematria with his hometown of Milwaukee. When Twin Peaks ended back in 2017, David Lynch was exactly 3,737 weeks old. And in that same reduction method, Twin Peaks equals 37. Uecker died 37 days before the main character's birthday. But this also provides a fascinating prime number connection, because the 37th prime number is 157. Now, if you were to include the end date with the aforementioned measurements here with the 156, we find that the Pope was born 1,057 days after Bob Uecker and was a span of exactly 1,057 months when he died. 157 is also a number stamped on the man named Bob from Twin Peaks. Killer Bob, as his name is spelled out, equals 157. So does the actor who portrays him, Frank Silva, 157. Now, the actor's full name is listed as Frank A. Silva. Notice how Frank A. Silva has matching 261 Gematria with Killer Bob. Well, 261 connects back to the voice of the Brewers. 261. And Uecker was born on the 26th day of the first month. 126/1. This is, of course, also written 126 here in the States, like the city of Milwaukee, 126 with capitals. When the first run of Twin Peaks on television ended, it happened on a date with 126 numerology. That ending also was the 161st day of the year. Well, 161 is a lot like the date the 16th of January, 16/1, when all of this news was breaking. In the reverse order, the name Bob Uecker equals 161. On top of that, Bob Uecker also equals the 93rd prime number using standard Gematria. And the series ended in 2017 on the date 9/3. 9/3 also found in the Sumerian value of David Keith Lynch, 930. So this is just to show how, for decades, this one television series and its revival several years ago are remarkably numerically connected to Bob Uecker. In fact, the show's first run, its first 2 seasons, lasted exactly 1 year and 9 weeks. And 19 is the ordinal gematria of Bob. And Bob was the longtime commentator for the Milwaukee Brewers, which equals 190. Consider how the best player in the history of the Milwaukee Brewers wore number 19. Robin Yount, Rockin' Robin. But the number 19 is also a significant number connected to the moon. And if you saw my video on Bob Uecker, you would know that it was all synced up with our lone satellite circling the Earth. The moon has something called the Metonic cycle, which is a period of just about exactly 19 years, which syncs up almost perfectly with 235 synodic months or lunar orbits. But this number 19 almost always points to a big riddle with the moon. So let's talk about the moon. Every celestial body that's visible with the naked eye has its own magic square, and the largest one is the moon because this is the closest body to Earth. This is a 9x9 magic square, which means there are 81 squares in the entirety of it. The numbers 1 through 81 sum to 3321. So that's the value of the entire magic square of the moon. You know the guy who reportedly took us to the moon? Former Nazi, then NASA scientist Wernher von Braun. Notice how in the Latin method of gematria, which is one I consider to be the most significant, Wernher von Braun's full name equals 3321, which is the magic square of the moon. And his common name even has the same digits, 2231. Well, notice how when you measure between the birthday of Pope Francis and David Lynch, we find that they were born 3,321 days apart. In the alphabetic order, the moon equals 90. Again, this was Bob Uecker's age when he passed away. 1990 is also the year that Twin Peaks first aired on ABC. The main character of Twin Peaks is named Cooper, and his name also equals 90. How does David Lynch's full name tie into this? David Keith Lynch. Well, that name has Latin gematria of 1321. And this is the 216th prime number. The moon is just about exactly 2,160 miles across at its equator. We call this the equatorial diameter of the moon. 216 is 6 cubed. And this brings us to the major number of the moon, 666. 6 times 6 times 6, connecting directly to the width of the moon. And I mentioned earlier, Fire Walk with Me, the name of the movie for Twin Peaks from 1992. You have to appreciate the gematria here, 2083. Well, this is the same number you get when you write out 666. 2083. And this is a rather significant prime number, the 314th prime number. Well, as I mentioned earlier, this all ties to the Eclipse code, right? Uecker dying 3 months and 14 days after his final game. Twin Peaks Season 3 lasting 3 months and 14 days. The 314th prime number connecting to 666 and the name of the Twin Peaks movie. Now, in the reverse alphabetic order, when you write out 666, it sums to 211. This is a number important to the Vatican, where Pope Francis currently calls home, as the Vatican was founded on February 11th, or 211. Why am I not finding the date here? I guess it's the actual Vatican I gotta look up. Oh, there it is, February 11th, 211. Man, sometimes I'm slow on my computer during these live streams, but this 211, so not only is this the gematria of 666, but 211 is also the 47th prime number. And if you look up Revelation 4:7, you'll see that this is the verse that first describes the four beasts. And the word beast equals 47 in the alphabetic order. Both Francis and Vatican also share this 47 gematria with total eclipse. And as I mentioned earlier, Uecker was 4,747 weeks old when he died. This Pi Day eclipse 47 days after his birthday. A number connected to the circle. So it all goes back to pi and the circle once again. 47, the 15th prime number. The letter that's a circle, the letter O, that's the 15th prime number. So this circles back to what I mentioned earlier, with Uecker dying 15 weeks after his last game, the same amount of time that Twin Peaks Season 3 lasted. Now, in the alphabetic order, 666 equals 275. Now, this was a number of great significance in my Bob Uecker decode. When Bob Uecker died, Mario Mendoza was 27,050 days old. And Uecker's passing was 3,275 weeks exactly after his Major League Baseball debut. Well, on top of that, this also syncs up with the two great American eclipses that passed over the United States over the past 7 or 8 years. Uecker died 2,705 days after the first great American eclipse. When Twin Peaks Season 3 ended back in 2017, it was 2,750 days before the lunar eclipse in March on Pi Day. And the number 999, which is an upside-down 66, made several appearances in these measurements. As always, my posts are linked down below in the description if you want to see more. David Lynch has some noteworthy numbers as well for that Pi Day eclipse that connect back to Bob Uecker. But I want to talk about this number 88 as well, which was something I mentioned in my last video too, because 3.14, or pi, has Gematria of 888. So does the Milwaukee Brewers in Satanic Gematria, also 88 reduction. And also consider how David Lynch was born on Inauguration Day, January 20th. And he was born in the same year as Donald Trump, who's set to take office exactly 666 months after the moon landing. So this riddle goes deep, as always. But the name Trump equals 88. And in Sumerian, Donald J. Trump is 888. Now, the number 8 is closest to the letter B, which appears twice in the name Bob. But the name Bob also equals 88 with capital letters. And Bob died 88 months after the end of Twin Peaks, which began 58 years and 88 days after its lead character. The actor who played Bob in Twin Peaks was born 88 days before Bob Uecker's birthday. And when that actor died, Frank Silva, or Killer Bob, his age ended with 88 days. And don't forget, on the Pi Day eclipse in March, Pope Francis will be 88 years and 88 days old. So a lot of the same numbers I talked about with Bob Uecker, who died when Mario Mendoza was 888 months old, had his last game at 1,088 months and 8 days old. Mendoza also with that 88 birth numerology. So to wrap this up, I just want to talk a little bit about the Book of Revelation. And this is a big theme this year. In Hebrew Gematria, the word for revelation sums to 25 in reduction. And of course, here we are now in the year 25, so a lot of fun revelation riddles for us to unpack this year. In the alphabetic order, revelation equals 121. Or 11 squared. The main character of Twin Peaks is played by actor Kyle MacLachlan, whose name equals 121. When the show first premiered in 1990, it was on a date with 121 numerology. When the show returned in 2017, it was 121 days after David Lynch's birthday, right? But when the show ended, it was exactly 10,010 days after it first premiered, which was also 149 days after the show's anniversary. And the digits 1010 and 149 are also found in the Gematria of Revelation, the book that reveals the number of the beast as 666. Pope Francis is highly numerically connected to the Book of Revelation because Revelation is made up of a total of 404 verses. And in the Latin cipher, Pope Francis equals 404. Latin, a language revered by the Catholic Church. Bishop of Rome, in fact, the official title for the Pope, also has the 44 in the same cipher. Well, to top that off, when you write out the number 44, just as it's spelled, it equals 972. The Pope's real name, Jorge Bergoglio, has Gematria of 972, matching 44. In the reverse prime method, which I don't dive into too often, but I could not help but ignore, Robert George Uecker, the broadcaster's full name, equals 972. Well, 4,400 days is 12 years and 17 days. And shout out to Cody in the chat who pointed this out to me last week, because we recently just passed 4,400 days after the end of the Mayan calendar. But that same duration is 12 years and 17 days. And 12/17 is the birthday of Pope Francis, December 17th. The first day of Saturnalia, by the way. Well, measuring from the end of Twin Peaks to the end of Bob Uecker's commentating career was 12,170 days. Also consider how we just recently had the wildfires break out in Los Angeles, exactly 1,217 weeks after the 9/11 attacks. And that theme was explored at the beginning of this video, because all of this news made headlines on the upside-down 9/11 date, 1/16, January 16th, the same day that Bob Uecker passed. Worth noting that Bob Uecker was going to be 91 years old on January 26th. And 91 is a number strongly connected to both Milwaukee and Wisconsin. Wisconsin 91 in reverse standard, Milwaukee 91 in regular standard. And you know what? There's going to be something here too. Yep, I knew it. Okay, guys, so Wisconsin equals 881, and Milwaukee equals 188. Well, look at Pope Francis's age on the date Bob Uecker died. Well, my heavens, he was exactly 88 years and 1 month old. And the broadcaster from Milwaukee, Wisconsin dies. Wow. I saw that 881 when I was doing my decodes, but I couldn't tie it to anything. For some reason, I forgot to type out the name of the city and state. But that's a big one. No doubt, the death of Bob Uecker synced up with the Catholic Church and their 5 doors riddle. That's been huge this year. You know, of course, my video on Bob Uecker I think is pretty good, but this one on the 5 holy doors is also strong. And now that I think of it, you know, the 5th door was open on the 5th day of the year. And then Bob Uecker died 11 days later. And 11 is the 5th prime number. So it really does all tie back to the Catholic Church. All roads leading to Rome once again. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in today. Appreciate all the comments, all the likes, all the heart emojis, however you guys show your love. It's all much appreciated. Keeps me going to do these decodes and break down the crafty numerical universe that we find ourselves inhabiting in these wild times. All right, guys, I'll be signing off. Hope everyone enjoys their weekend. Stay safe out there. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya!